So after 3 days, 3 intense days, the Munich Security Conference is officially over. You can see the police cordons are gone, most of the guests are gone, a couple of media left, everyone's packing up and going home, getting back to their home countries to try and process what happened here and maybe hopefully implement some action. This was my first time reporting at a conference like this, so I have nothing to compare it with. But of course, listening to some of the statements, some of the discussions, and of course the slogan "lose, lose" in the security conference report, it's not difficult to make the guess that this is a more darker atmosphere than you usually have at these events. The events this weekend are also happening on the backdrop of some of the darkest and scariest developments on the front line that we've seen in Ukraine for a long time. Of course, I'm talking about the Ukrainian withdrawal from the city of Avdiivka after being surrounded or nearly surrounded in some parts by huge numbers of Russian forces backed by large fire support from all weapons that they have possible. So for me personally, having reported just a few weeks ago from the front line and now finding myself walking around in suits with all these other people in suits while talking to soldiers down on the front line about this incredibly tricky situation around Avdiivka, it's been a very surreal experience. But this contrast of the discussions here at the international level and the fighting on the ground in Avdiivka, this is connected, and it all brings us to the crux of the situation that we are facing now with the war in Ukraine. Ukraine's summer counteroffensive, after a lot of expectation, failed to make a strategic breakthrough, and since then it's Russia that has taken the initiative and is starting to really move forward now. In the meantime, a huge, crucial military aid funding package from the US to Ukraine is still blocked in Congress, and the effects of it are starting to be felt on the front line, with not enough ammunition for artillery, rocket artillery and air defense being a part of the reason why Ukraine is now struggling to hold. This is, of course, all pretty bad news, but it's important to maintain contact with reality and be honest about this news. And what's interesting over the last weekend has been to see how honest world leaders really are with each other and with all of us. President Zelensky, in his visit yesterday, was very honest. So he talked about this negative trajectory of events in pretty simple terms. If the West abandons Ukraine, Russia will destroy us. They will take Ukraine and maybe move on and attack other countries, including NATO countries, in the future.
If Ukraine will be alone, you have to understand what will be. Russia will destroy us, destroy Baltic, destroy Poland, and they can do it.
But for other countries, including some which have been strong supporters of Ukraine, sometimes the lines between real honesty and wishful thinking can be a bit blurred. Over the weekend, we spoke to the leaders, foreign ministers, defense ministers of a few different European countries. And you'll see there's maybe a pattern there. Netherlands, Sweden, Finland, Lithuania. These are all countries which, in their own way, have gone out of their way to support Ukraine with weapons deliveries, or with important political motions, or in the case of Finland, for example, to join NATO and provide this positive example for what Ukraine's security could look like in the future. These countries have all been strong advocates for Ukraine on a worldwide level. But even with them, sometimes in discussions, you hear the same things. You hear Putin has failed to destroy Ukraine. Putin has failed to split the transatlantic alliance, has failed to split NATO, and so on and so on.
And you know this better than I that Russia expected in a couple of weeks after the 23rd of February 2022 to have the big celebration in Moscow, having been able to capture Ukraine. They had to cancel that celebration.
Time moves forward, and that failure cannot be granted. And on both the NATO front and on the Ukraine front, things are slowly seeming to move in Russia's favor, and will continue to do so if action isn't taken. Now, American former president and presidential hopeful Donald Trump isn't here, but his presence is felt everywhere. With him, his comments about NATO, and also the refusal of the Republicans to pass this crucial aid package for Ukraine. Thanks to this, one of the main themes, constant themes over the past weekend at this conference has been the idea of Europe without America, of European security without the assistance and guaranteed support that Europe always thought they had in the post-war era. As Kajsa Ollongren, the Dutch defense minister, said to us, they need to start thinking about a Trump-proof Europe.
We have to get Putin-proof, as we see every day in the war in Ukraine. And now these comments by Donald Trump has made us realize we maybe also have to get ourselves Trump-proof.
Kind of weird to think about it, a Trump-proof Europe, but that's where we are at this point. Some countries are beginning to get their act together. A constant theme of discussion here has been the growth, the stepping up of European military industrial production capacity. We know how much this lags behind the need in Ukraine, but also how much this could be under threat if, again, the US is not here to help. So countries all over Europe are upping their production, especially of 155mm shells, which are one of the most crucial pieces of ammunition in Ukraine. But still, it's happening too slowly. France is committing 8,000 shells per month, and that's about as many as Ukraine can shoot in a day. One promising initiative came from Czech President Petr Pavel, who said that he has found sources potentially of hundreds of thousands of 155mm shells and some 122mm shells for Ukraine's Soviet artillery, all abroad outside the European Union. But what is needed is financing, what is needed is action and the decisions to make those steps, because otherwise Ukraine could be left behind. And that brings us to the other big question of this conference. If Europe is so keen on stepping up its own ability to defend itself, if Europe is starting to take the threat of even some kind of attack on a NATO country seriously, can it do so and still protect, defend Ukraine and bring it along with them into a European transatlantic community in the future? As we can see, Russia's war against Ukraine is still continuing as intensely as ever. So talk about the post-war security architecture and agreements with Ukraine are a bit difficult, but some countries are taking the initiative, more and more in fact. So about a few months ago, the G7 all agreed to sign bilateral security guarantees with Ukraine. Now this is starting to happen. So just a month or so ago, the UK was the first country to sign such an agreement with Ukraine. Now, in a huge move, France and Germany have joined the club. We spoke to the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Mark Rutte, yesterday, and he said they're working on it with President Zelensky.
We are discussing intensely now with Volodymyr Zelensky's team on coming up with security guarantees bilaterally, the Netherlands with Ukraine, and I'm cautiously optimistic that we can close those discussions fairly soon.
So slowly things are moving in the right direction. And again, we're in a very dangerous and very uncertain world. But today the Finnish president-elect told us that that is his vision for Ukraine's moving in to the European community. An iron curtain between Ukraine, Europe on one side and Russia on the other, and then step by step. So first the security agreements, then the European Union integration, membership, and then comes NATO.
NATO membership for Ukraine is what we should strive for. And I'm sure that we'll see language in that direction as we start moving towards the Washington summit in July. So step by step, but I think the direction is quite clear. It's just a question of time.
So overall, what do we think? It's uncertain. There are a lot of issues. There are lots of actions to be taken. Unfortunately, a lot of this still lies in the hands of the Republican Party. But at least there is this understanding, this wake up among European countries. They need to get their act together, because a world without an independent Ukraine and a Europe without an independent Ukraine is as dangerous as ever, and everything needs to be done to stop that from happening. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to cover this for the Kyiv Independent, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. See you later.